My name is Gary Sutherland. I was a high school wrestling coach and physical education teacher in Duluth, Minnesota for 27 years. I am the kind of man who shoveled his own driveway at 5 in the morning in January because he considered a snowblower a form of moral compromise. I fished ice holes on Lake Superior in temperatures that made other grown men stay inside with their coffee and their common sense. I was not reckless. I was northern. There is a distinction, and people who did not grow up above the 46th parallel may not fully appreciate it. And in February of 2014, at the age of 53, I went through the ice on a lake 12 miles outside of Duluth, and I was under that water for somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes, and I died. And what I found underneath the cold and the dark was the most profound peace I have ever experienced, or expect to experience on this side of whatever comes next. Let me start where everything starts, which is with who I was before the ice. I grew up in Duluth, the son of a long-haul truck driver, and a mother who worked the breakfast shift at a Perkins restaurant on London Road for 23 years. We were not wealthy. We were not struggling. We were the specific kind of northern Midwestern working class that considers hardship a character-building opportunity and complaining about it a personal failure. I played 3 sports in high school. Wrestling was the one that fit. The discipline of it, the individual accountability, the way it rewarded not just strength but the willingness to be uncomfortable longer than your opponent. I went to University of Minnesota Duluth on a partial athletic scholarship, got my education degree, came home, and started coaching the following fall. I never left. Some people stay because they cannot leave. I stayed because I looked at the lake every morning on my way to school and understood that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I married Karen in 1989. Karen taught 2nd grade at Lincoln Elementary for 30 years and had the specific superpower of 2nd grade teachers, which is the ability to manage chaos with warmth so complete that the chaos does not realize it is being managed. We had 2 sons, Derek, who was working in construction management in the Twin Cities by 2014, and Kyle, who was finishing his junior year at UMD, and who shared my enthusiasm for ice fishing in the way that second sons sometimes inherit the enthusiasms that first sons are too sensible to absorb. I want to tell you about my faith, or my lack of it, because it is relevant to what happened. I was raised Lutheran in the way that most people in northeastern Minnesota are raised Lutheran, which is to say that faith was woven into the fabric of the community without being examined too closely by any individual thread. I believed in something. I was not sure what. I believed in the lake. I believed in honest work and the kind of cold that clears your head. I believed that when people died, they were gone, which was sad, and that the people who remained should honor them by continuing to shovel their driveways and show up on time. I had not spent significant intellectual energy on the question of what came after because the question had always seemed less immediately pressing than the question of what needed to be done before. By February of 2014, I had been coaching wrestling for 24 years. My team had won 3 state championships, which I mention not to brag but to tell you that I was not, at 53, a man who experienced a great deal of uncertainty about his purpose or his place. I was anchored. I was useful. I was, in every way I knew how to measure, fine. And then I went through the ice. It is a Saturday in February. February in Duluth runs its own specific psychological program. The holidays are finished. Spring is not yet a concept anyone takes seriously, and the lake sits under 3 feet of ice that has been there since December and will be there until April, and might as well be permanent from where you are standing. Kyle and I had driven out to Little Caribou Lake the previous weekend, and I had drilled several test holes, and the ice was reading at 22 inches. which in the Duluth ice fishing community is the equivalent of a green light, a firm handshake, and a money-back guarantee. This Saturday I go alone. Kyle has a study group. Karen has plans with her sister. I load the truck with my auger, my ice shanty, my thermos of coffee that Karen made the way I like it, strong enough to argue back, and the particular quiet satisfaction of a man heading to a frozen lake at 7 a.m. with no obligations until dinner. I set up 200 yards from the eastern shore. The ice is firm underfoot, that specific sound it makes when it is in good shape. Not hollow, not groaning, just solid and cold and trustworthy. I drill my holes, I set my lines. I sit in the shanty with the coffee and the silence, which is one of the finer silences available to human beings. The silence of a frozen lake on a clear February morning in Minnesota, which has a quality of complete and organized stillness that I have never found anywhere else. I am outside the shanty, checking a tip-up flag about 30 yards from my drilling site when I hear it. The sound ice makes when it is not going to hold is specific and brief, and does not repeat. It is a single crack, low and broad, less like a sound than like the ice clearing its throat. Every person who has spent time on frozen lakes in Minnesota knows this sound the way they know their own name. The problem is that between hearing it and responding to it there is a gap, and in that gap the ice under my left foot goes from 22 inches of trustworthy to nothing at all. I go in fast. That is the first thing I want to tell you about falling through ice, because people imagine it as a slow process, and it is not. One moment you are standing on a frozen lake in February. The next moment the lake has you, and you are going down, and the water is a temperature that your nervous system has no adequate category for. The cold is not cold the way cold usually is cold. It is absolute. It is a complete renegotiation of the terms of your existence. Every system in your body receives the same message simultaneously. This is not survivable. I am a strong swimmer. In February water under ice, this matters less than you would think. The cold begins shutting down voluntary muscle control within the first 30 to 60 seconds. I know this now. I did not know it with this precision at the time, but my body understood it before my mind caught up. My arms are moving, but they are not moving efficiently. I can see the hole above me, a pale rectangle of gray February sky, and I am orienting toward it, but the distance between where I am and where that hole is seems to be increasing rather than decreasing. I do not understand this at first. What is happening is that the current under the ice, small and slow but present, is moving me laterally, away from the opening. The sky rectangle gets smaller. I want to tell you about the fear because I think it is important to not skip over it in the rush to get to the peace. The fear was total. It was the fear of a man who understands exactly what is happening to him and cannot stop it, which is a specific and terrible kind of fear. I thought of Karen. I thought of Derek and Kyle with the sudden, sharp clarity that extreme situations produce. Not memories exactly, but their realness, their specificity, the exact weight of their importance to me, arriving all at once. I thought, I did not tell them enough times. I hit the underside of the ice with both hands. I can feel it, but I cannot feel it. My hands are reporting contact without sensation, the way a phone call sounds when the connection is failing. I move along the underside, trying to find the edge of the hole. My movement is becoming effortful in a way that movement has never been effortful before. My body is making a decision that my mind is not fully participating in yet. The light from the hole is completely gone. The cold reaches a depth that is no longer cold. This is the physiological reality of severe hypothermia. At a certain point, the pain of cold becomes something else, something that the nervous system processes differently, something that begins to feel, and I want to be precise about this, like release, like the removal of something that had been there so long you had forgotten it was extra weight. I stop moving, not because I choose to stop, because the choice and the movement have both become, quietly, unavailable. And this is where I need to ask you to stay with me, because what I am about to describe is the reason I am here. The darkness under the ice is complete. It is the most total darkness I have ever experienced, and I grew up in Minnesota and have experienced some genuinely committed darkness. But this darkness is different, in a quality I did not expect. It is not empty. It is the opposite of empty. It is the fullest thing I have ever been inside. The peace arrives the way the cold arrived, which is to say all at once and completely. But where the cold was an assault, the peace is the most natural thing that has ever happened to me. I want to be careful not to make this sound pleasant in a way that minimizes the horror of what preceded it, because the horror was real, and the drowning was real. And if you fell through ice right now, I would not want you to think that what happened next makes the falling through ice acceptable. What I want to say is that on the other side of the worst thing that has ever happened to my body, there was something waiting that my body had no jurisdiction over. I am no longer under the ice. I am aware that my body is under the ice. This is one of the peculiarities of the experience, that I retained a kind of ambient knowledge of my physical situation without being distressed by it. The way you might know it is raining outside while you are warm inside. My body is under the ice. I am somewhere that does not have ice or cold, or the particular desperation of the last several minutes. What there is light. And what there is, alongside the light, is the most complete silence I have ever experienced. Not the silence of the frozen lake, which is beautiful but is still the silence of a place, of an absence of sound. This silence is alive. This silence is the sound of everything being exactly as it should be, experienced as the absence of anything that should be different. I am going to tell you the truth about the peace, which is that I do not have the right tools to describe it. I was a wrestling coach. My vocabulary for interior experience was built primarily around the physical. I can tell you about the cold because I have language for cold. The peace I experienced under that ice does not have adequate language, and I discovered this when I tried to tell Karen about it 3 weeks later in our kitchen in Duluth, while she stood at the counter holding her coffee cup in both hands the way she does. And I watched her face change as I spoke. And even then, with the person who knew me better than anyone alive, the words were not big enough for what I was trying to put inside them. But I will try, because that is why I am here. Imagine the feeling of coming home after the longest trip of your life. Not your house, something larger and older than your house. Imagine coming home to a place that was always home, even though you have no memory of being there before. And the recognition is so complete that the absence of memory does not matter, because the knowing goes deeper than memory. That is the entry point. That is the outer edge of what I experienced. There were no beings in robes. I want to tell you that because I think some people expect a specific visual presentation, and mine did not have one. What there was presence, a warmth so personal and so total that the word warmth is immediately inadequate the moment I use it. It knew me, not knew about me, not had a file on me, knew me, the way a father knows his son, The way a person who has watched you your whole life and loved every version of you knows you. It knew the wrestling coach and the ice fisherman and the man who had not told his family enough times that he loved them. And it held all of those things with a completeness that made judgment feel like a category error. I was shown something. I use that word knowing it is imprecise, but experience of being shown is the most honest description. What I was shown was a principle, not a rule, not a law, but a structural truth about existence. And it was this: every moment of genuine human connection is permanent, not remembered. Permanent. The moment you really looked at someone you love, not past them, not through them, but at them, with your full attention and without your armor. That moment does not end. It is not stored somewhere. It is still happening. The fabric of what existence is made of includes every such moment as a living thread. I understood, in that space, that the times I had coached a kid through a hard loss and watched something in him become more solid than it had been before, those moments were not gone. The morning Kyle was 8 years old and we caught his first northern pike, and I watched his face and thought, this is one of the best things I have ever seen. That moment is still happening somewhere. The fabric of what is real includes it. And I understood, with a grief that was also somehow not grief, but the loving acknowledgement of something I needed to carry back, that I had been conservative with my attention, that I had given enormous effort to tasks and insufficient presence to people, that the person most affected by this was Karen, who had been present in a room with me for 25 years, while I was frequently somewhere in the vicinity of the room, but not fully inside it. That was the message, not an accusation, a compass point. Be present. The moments of genuine presence are the permanent ones. The achievements dissolve. The presence remains. I do not know how long I was in that space. I know from the incident report that I was in the water for between 8 and 10 minutes, and that my core temperature when I was pulled out was 81 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the kind of core temperature that appears in the medical literature primarily in case studies. My brain was largely protected by the vasoconstriction that severe cold produces. The body, at the extreme end, sacrifices the periphery to protect the center. The brain is the center. My brain was cold, but not, as it turned out, finished. A man named Dale Bergstrom pulled me out. Dale was ice fishing 400 yards away and saw the tip-up flag that I had walked out to check, still planted, with no one attending it. Dale is 71 years old, a retired electrician from Proctor, and he walked the 400 yards because something did not look right, which is the kind of small decision that the universe occasionally uses to redirect what would otherwise be an endpoint. He found the hole I had gone through. He found me 6 feet from it, having drifted back toward the opening in a way that the current should not have allowed. He pulled me out with a rope he had in his ice fishing sled, the kind of rope that every experienced ice fisherman carries and most of them never use. He started CPR. He had taken a refresher course the previous fall because his wife had encouraged him to, and he had done it mostly to stop the encouraging. He did that for 7 minutes before the Duluth Fire Department reached the lake. I came back during the ambulance ride. Not gradually, present, then abruptly more present. The first sensation was the cold, which had moved from absolute to merely profound. And the second sensation was the oxygen mask. And the third sensation was a paramedic named Josh, who was speaking to me in a calm and very loud voice, and who looked from my angle like the most welcome face I had ever seen in my life. I spent 8 days at St. Luke's Hospital in Duluth, 3 days in their hypothermia protocol, which involves controlled rewarming and a level of medical monitoring that I found both reassuring and very tiring. My attending physician, Dr. Sarah Kimball, told me on day 4 that the outcome I had achieved was not consistent with the clinical presentation, which I took to mean that the numbers had suggested a different ending. I told her I had been somewhere warm. She wrote something in her chart. Derek drove up from the Twin Cities. Kyle was there within an hour of the call. Karen sat beside my bed in a way that I recognized as the way she sits when she is not going to move regardless of what anyone suggests, which is a sitting style that I had come to associate with her most serious positions on matters of importance. On day 2, when I was coherent enough to sustain a conversation, I told her what had happened under the ice. Karen is a second-grade teacher. She manages the full range of human experience with warmth and without drama. She listened to everything. She held my hand. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Gary, I have been trying to get your full attention for 25 years. I said, "I know. I'm sorry it took a frozen lake." She said, "I am just glad you came back from it." The integration was its own process, and I will be honest that it was not seamless for a man whose entire self-concept was built on physical capability and forward motion. I went to a therapist in Duluth, a man named Dr. Frank Olson, who specialized in trauma and who had the useful quality of not being remotely impressed by the wrestling coach credentials and the state championships. He helped me understand that the peace I had experienced under the ice was not the same thing as the peace of dying, and that I could access versions of it in a life that continued, but that accessing it required exactly the kind of presence I had been shown was the point. I retired from coaching in 2018, not because the NDE took it from me, but because I had done it, and I knew I had done it, and there were other things that needed the attention I had been giving it. Karen and I travel now, not exotic travel. We drove Route 66 last spring, which Karen had wanted to do since 1978, and which I had been agreeing to do for 40 years without making it happen. We drove it. We stopped everywhere. I was fully present for every diner and every roadside oddity and every sunset in New Mexico, and every moment of Karen looking at something and finding it delightful. Dale Bergstrom comes for dinner every year on the Saturday closest to February 14th, which is the date he pulled me out of Little Caribou Lake. We call it the anniversary, and we do not call it anything more dramatic than that. He brings his wife Marlene. Karen makes pot roast. We talk about ice fishing and grandchildren and the twins' prospects for the coming season. And at some point in the evening, I look at Dale across the table, and I think about the 400 yards he walked because a tip-up flag looked unattended. And I feel the particular gratitude of a man who understands very specifically what he was given back. Here is what I want to leave with you. From a wrestling coach who went through the ice in February and found something extraordinary in the dark underneath it. The cold strips everything away. I mean that literally, and I mean it as a metaphor for every difficulty you have ever faced. When the cold is absolute, when the situation removes every option except the one that is actually true, what remains is something that the cold cannot reach. It has been there your entire life. It will be there after everything else is gone. And it is not afraid. And it is not alone. And it has been patient with you in a way that makes the word patient sound insufficient. We spend so much of our lives in the vicinity of the people we love, nearby, present in the logistical sense. What I was shown in the water under Little Caribou Lake is that nearby is not the same as present, and that the moments of real presence are the ones that last, and that we have more of those moments available to us than we typically use. Be here. Look at the people across the table from you and actually see them. The moment you do that, the real moment, the full attention moment, That moment is permanent. That moment is already woven into something that does not end. We are all going under the ice eventually. Every one of us. And what is waiting on the other side of the cold is not what we feared. It is what we always hoped and never quite believed. It is home. It is the warmth underneath the cold, the light underneath the dark, the presence that has known your name since before you had one. We are going to be okay. I promise you that from the bottom of a frozen lake in February. We are all, without a single exception, going to be more than okay.